All right, folks, it's the guy with the bow tie checking with you live for another edition of Business with Benefits. To my right, I have Scott Hilton. He has decided to grace the internet with us and talk a little bit about Georgia. Scott, how you doing today?
Good, Daryl. How you doing?
Pretty good. I'm glad we could get this set up. It's definitely timely information as it kicked off on Friday. So before we get too deep into things, I'm going to say thank you to hashtag Team Live. Let us know where you are, please, in the bottom of the screen. Hashtag Team Replay as well. We appreciate viewership however it comes in. And Scott and I met at the Small Business Week in Georgia last, I think it was September or so. Wasn't it October, September, or something like that? Okay. So they kind of connected online a little bit. So we're all kind of going through COVID-19, and obviously there's some changes going on with different places. So before we get too deep into that, let people know who you are and why they should listen to what you have to say today.
I appreciate that. Well, good afternoon, everyone. As always, I know everyone's kind of hopping from one Zoom call to the next. I wish we were all in person together here, but I am here today because the governor had the foresight about a year ago to create a commission strictly designed around helping small business here in the state. He wanted to see Georgia be the #1 state for small business. And so in order to do that, he had the idea that we ought to cut needless regulations and streamline government so that we can deliver for you, small business, better. And so we were, like I said, created a year ago. Our job is to serve as a liaison to state government, to the business community, but also look at creating recommendations for the governor on how we can better serve our constituents. And so, I would submit to you that role is more important now more than ever because small businesses are really getting hurt as a result of this pandemic. And so we are here to serve and figure out ways to help small businesses get through this difficult and challenging time.
Perfect. Okay. So it's obviously been national news that Georgia's opening back up. Everybody's talking about that as a thing. And you and I talked about this a little bit. So when we say reopen, what does that actually mean in the context of what was closed?
That's a great question. So as you sort of follow all this along, there were certain businesses that were required to close. And those were all ones that made sense at the time, right? Where kind of high touch, people in close proximity. So large events, theaters, concert halls, haircut places, some medical procedures and things like that. And so those were ordered to close. I would say those were a small segment of our overall business community in the state. A lot of businesses are allowed to remain open so long as they followed certain public health guidelines. And so, about a week ago, last Monday, the governor said that those businesses that we had closed a few weeks prior to that are now allowed to reopen, but under very strict guidelines. And a lot of those came out this past Thursday and Friday. So based on the industry you're in, yes, you can reopen, but in a lot of cases, you've got to follow anywhere between 20 to 30 different public health guidelines and restrictions to keep the public safe.
Okay. And that's interesting to know because the news will kind of just say it's reopened and there's, good and bad with saying that. So The decision to reopen, what was the main driver you think for that decision? Because obviously this has two sides to the story. Small business was hurt a lot by this. So when you and the governor in the office kind of talked about this, what were kind of the main drivers for why to reopen certain things?
Yeah, so the governor is a big data guy, and he is looking at and consuming as much information as he possibly can. And so, what we've seen over the last, call it 10 days or so, is a decline in the rate of new infections. And so, if you look at our curve, we've definitely been able to kind of, it appears thus far based on the data, hit that peak and or have a nice downtrend going. And so, I think that made us comfortable with the decision, or made the governor comfortable with it. I would also say, just from a human impact standpoint, we're hearing from a lot of constituents who are really struggling right now. Frankly, they don't have 2 or 3 weeks of cash flow or luxury to close down for a month and not have any business, and they're hurting. They've spent their entire lives, borrowing money, growing a business, and are at risk of losing it here in just a few weeks. And so that was taken into consideration along with this. I'll share with you, heard it today. I talked to a small business owner up in LJ. He's got an ice cream shop and they've been closed for 3 weeks now. And he's having to decide between, do I pay this $700 power bill or just close my business? And how do I feed my family? And those very, very difficult decisions. And so we're weighing those considerations when we think about reopening as well.
Okay, and then just going to check in with the audience real quick. We had Santina Dieng. She said she's in Atlanta right now. She's general manager at Family Dollar, so she's checking in for large businesses in the local community. So the decision, it was certain things we opened up. We opened up, salons, gyms, things of that nature. Was there an economic reason we chose those particular industries to be reopened, or was it more of a they were crying the most and asking for more help than anybody else?
No, again, there was a certain number, I forget what the exact number, but there was a certain number of industries that we had closed, and we opened a portion of them. Some, that our public health folks told us, obviously like Mercedes-Benz, stadium, we're not going to reopen that, large kind of venues like that. But there were certain industries that could be reopened without, seriously threatening public health. And it could be reopened in ways that we could do it in a very smart, measured way, where we could put kind of guardrails around them. I think restaurants are a good example, right? So those opened up on Monday. We've got at least kind of 20 to 25 prescriptive things that they've got to do before they can reopen. And I'll give a shout out to the private sector.
Okay, so that's a good question, or a good point to bring up.
Go ahead.
Oh, you got to go ahead. The sound was delayed. Go ahead.
Again, restaurants
there we go.
Do a certain number of things to reopen, and so we're seeing a lot of them kind of make the decision now: do I reopen and make those decisions, or do I remain closed for a little while longer? And so we've been very encouraged with how responsible people have been thus far.
Okay, so that list of items, let's say I run a pizza shop or something. What is the implication for my business if I don't follow that list of rules and I do reopen?
Great question. So there's certain licenses that you do have to obtain, both state and locally. And so I would imagine there'd be some impact there along with some fines. And so, but even beyond that, frankly, I think the consumer will feel unsafe going to your location if you're not abiding by the criteria we've laid out. And I'll tell you, a lot of the private sector has gone above and beyond even what we've, the minimum kind of threshold standards we've laid out. A lot of folks have said, we're going to go even beyond that because we want consumers to feel healthy and safe when they come to our location. And so again, I think a lot of the private sector is going to dictate that. I know for me and my family, if we go to some restaurant and they're not abiding by the rules, we're probably going to be out of there pretty quick, and they won't have our money. That's for sure.
Okay, that makes sense. And then we had a quick comment from a friend of mine, Jim Hughes. He said, hello, Daryl and Scott. He's checking in. He runs a marketing business here in the area. So that decision isn't easy to make. To say, we're going to reopen a state that's still going through some outbreaks here and there with us. Obviously, Tyson's had some issues. Different meat producing places have had issues. with that happening recently with the executive order to keep open meat producing plants, has that kind of affected you guys' decision making process with the reopen?
Well, so that happened at a federal level where
Right.
Trump is trying to kind of keep the food chain moving and available. I'll tell you from a local standpoint here, and the governor mentioned this in his comments earlier this week. We're keeping our eyes on Gainesville.
Mm-hmm.
We are the largest poultry producer in the world, and so we've seen some uptick in cases out that way. And we sent our insurance commissioner, John King, earlier this week up to that community just to share with them some of the public health measures that they ought to be following and adhering to. And that's where I've really been impressed is we've been very tactical as far as responding to areas. I know Albany is well known as having a super spreader event down there. And so
Yeah.
we've been very tactile as to where we go and how we respond. And so, very cognizant around, important industries in our state's economy like poultry and culture and so many others.
Okay, so my hope is that all of this, we're trying to get the economy back going. That's been the biggest battle with this is health versus economy. That's kind of been the two sides of this. So we're doing this reopen now. What's kind of for Georgia citizens to get the full process? I know it's kind of a fluid thing, but are there stages to what's going to happen next? As far as we did, a few businesses now. Is there a certain criteria for this to continue going forward?
Great question. So I'll offer two things to you. A lot of folks have asked us, Scott, I've got a business. I think I'm allowed to reopen. What do I need to do? I would encourage everyone on this live feed here, go check out the Georgia Economic Development website. They've got a great page on there, right? If you go to their main site, Georgia Economic Development, they've got a little tab that you can click, and it shows you exactly what requirements you must follow to reopen your business. So that'll help answer that question. And then a lot of folks have asked us for resources for their business. So everyone has heard about the PPP program, resources through the SBA. Would be happy to answer any questions in that end as well. But for phase two and kind of the next steps of fully reopening, again, the governor has said this, it's all about testing. We've got to get more testing out there. Right now, we have 65 test sites across the state. We can test to about 4,000 people per day. Right now, you can go down to Georgia Tech, get a test done in one of their parking lots and have the results in as early as 30 minutes.
Okay.
But yeah, we've got to get people tested because I think that'll give us confidence as employees and as consumers that it's a safe environment out there.
Well, that's good to know that because my wife's friend had somebody go to Georgia Tech and we didn't even know Georgia Tech was a testing site. So it's good you're sharing that with people because when you look at the media, they're saying 1% of Georgia has been tested. And I don't know how much reality is to that, but I mean, with knowing the test sites, are we only at about 1%? You think? And I'd hate to put you on the spot for that, but if you don't want to answer, that's fine.
No, that's a great question. I'll tell you this. So the one at Georgia Tech, it's fascinating. So we partner with CVS. They've got a little setup there. It's literally like a drive-through testing site. They dropped off 30,000 about a month ago tests, and we do about 1,000 a day. And so we just re-upped. We got another 30,000 out there. And so again, I know the governor. There are big numbers of folks that we're testing, but he still wants to see it a lot more than that. So I don't know the percentage of Georgians offhand. We've got a big state, a little over 10 million people. But we're testing literally as fast as we can get it out the door. And the state's testing about 4,000 a day. That doesn't include what your doctor's office is doing, what other hospitals are doing. So the number is probably bigger than that of tests per day.
Okay. So with everything kind of going on, I mean, small business got hit really hard with this overall, and that's basically your charge is helping, businesses in Georgia. So what are some things you're hoping to see come out of this for Georgia businesses? Because I know we don't make a lot of stuff in the States right now, and that's definitely a charge you guys are going for. So what's something you want to see come out of this crisis that helps us better prepare for situations like this in the future?
So one of the big things that the governor asked us was to remove red tape and regulation that small business faces every day. And so one of the things you've seen from this crisis is, we've had to move a lot of red tape out of the way to allow us to get things done a lot quicker. And so long term, I'd love to see us, and that's part of the work that we're working on for the governor, is let's develop a program where we reduce government regulation by 30% and let small business owners run their business and be profitable and get government out of the way. Because a lot of our small business owners are what I like to call the OOO. They're the only operating officer. And so they don't have time to deal with having to go to the bank and deal with government red tape and regulation and get all the permits and licensing and all that stuff. So I think we'll see that come out of it. One of the other things I would love to see come out of it is the state develop a one-stop shop site for small business. The biggest concern I hear right now is, Scott, all the resources that are out there are spread all over the place. Can we have one simple, easy to use, navigate site dedicated just for small business? And I think a crisis like this highlights that fact that when a crisis hits, let's get everything at your fingertips so you don't have to go search and figure out different programs that are available to you.
Yeah, that's definitely an issue, especially with the PPP information. It was all over the place for that. So people were kind of, my bank is giving me one thing, the Georgia Department of Labor is giving me one thing, the Economic Development Center is giving one thing. So I think that's an awesome idea to kind of consolidate everything. So what are some actionable things we're seeing for small business? Because the commission, you've been doing this for, not quite a year yet, but what are some strides you've seen happen with Georgia First that's really improved the economic situation for small businesses thus far?
Yeah, so what we've done, so we've spent the last year really, and it's amazing because no other state's done this. And so we've got a leg up on everyone else when it comes to small business recovery, because we've spent the last year looking at policies, operations of other states, and basically been taking their best practices of how they work with small business and bring them down here. So there's a number of recommendations that we're going to provide to the governor when our final report is due here in June. And like I said, the timing couldn't be any better because we're going to be handing him solutions to help small business just at the time that small business absolutely needs it the most. So we've looked at issues from access to capital has been a real big one, for small. How do we draw more capital to the state so entrepreneurs can thrive and survive? We've looked at tax reform. Taxes right now favor the big guys. And so how do we change it in a way to help the little guys? I know my wife runs a small business, and man, we hate it when we get that tax bill every year. It's just crazy. So there's that. There's licensing. We've looked at state procurement. How can we make it easier for small businesses to procure business from the state? We spend close to $4 billion a year, and small businesses aren't getting their share of those dollars. And so how do we make that easier? So those are just a sample of some of the things we're looking at, along with making it easier, like I said earlier, for you to start a business and run a business by getting regulation out of the way. Just duplicative regulation that doesn't make sense.
Okay, that makes sense. So, and with this, you're seeing the impacts of small business, everything happening. How do you've been talking to small businesses obviously frequently because that's you're staying in that space. What's the general consensus you're getting from people about the decision to reopen right now? Because it's all across the board. I'm kind of in the middle on some parts of it, but what's the general consensus you're hearing from the people you speak to in the community?
It's really mixed. So some small businesses are rearing to go, ready to go. I know I got my haircut on Friday, and my guy was ready to open, and he did it the right way, and he had all the precautions in place, and he was fully booked, and it was great that he could do that. A lot of them are remaining more cautious and saying, I'm going to give it a couple weeks to reopen. A lot of them are saying my employees are still kind of nervous. I'm going to, out of respect for them, stay closed. A lot of small businesses have to adapt, right? So not only do they have to hire and bring back folks, but they've got to change how their business operates. I know I work with our local YMCA here, and just the internal setup of how we've got the machines and everything, they've got to do a complete rehaul of that so people feel safe and comfortable going in. So it's been mixed. I think mostly positive. People are ready to get open and start making money again. I'll tell you, it's, as a small business, it's not easy, essentially shutting down for over a month and not having any revenue come in. So they're ready to go, but they're ready to do it the right way.
Okay, and that's an interesting question. I'm trying to talk to some people legally about this because there's this legal element of COVID-19. When you said business owners are kind of nervous, my employees aren't comfortable. Can you give any insight on that as far as any legal implications? Because I'm seeing different cases of workers' comp getting involved with COVID-19, but it's not fully laid out. So is Georgia doing anything about the legal side, saying, hey, I'm working here, I was exposed to COVID-19 because something wasn't done right? Is there any kind of talk of the legal implication for that for a business owner so they can know they're comfortable reopening?
We've gotten that question a lot, and it's a real concern. I saw there was some discussion at a federal level about legislation addressing that. I'm not familiar yet with any kind of conversation there. I imagine that will come in the form of legislation. Our General Assembly right now is actually suspended. They've been suspended since about mid-March, and we anticipate they'll return sometime May to middle of June. And so I would imagine that they'll probably take up that issue because, yeah, we want small business to feel, comfortable reopening.
Mm-hmm.
And because, we live in a very litigious society.
Right.
I would not be surprised to see someone attempt to do that type of lawsuit for sure.
Yeah, that's the thing I worry about the most. I mean, because like you mentioned, they're going through a month of no revenue. So they reopen, somebody contracts COVID-19 and it goes south. I just worry about if a lawsuit comes up, that's going to just totally wipe them out. So it's good that's being worked on. So right now, though, there's no present clear cut, if it happens on your watch, you're in trouble. There's no clear cut thing for that, it sounds like right now.
No, I mean, it depends. What complicates it is each business has their own insurance policy as well. And so for some folks, your insurance policy may cover that, if it covers viruses and whatnot. Some it may not be written in there. And so, there's a lot of work to figure that component out. But it's a real issue that I think we'll have to address.
Okay, and that's fair. As definitely as long as we're working on it. I know the recesses are happening, but it'll get worked on at some point. So
it's amazing, Daryl. I mean, it's just, things change so fast in this environment. I mean, week to week, it seems like a new challenge that's coming up. The private sector has been awesome. I mean, we've worked with them hand in hand to figure out, okay, what are those regulations that we need to put in place to allow people to feel comfortable opening back up. So, and some of our best ideas, frankly, come from folks who are out there grinding it every single day.
And that's great because, I mean, when you look at private sector, one thing is Georgia's become like the Hollywood of U.S. because of, different tax laws and things like that, helping them run movie studios here. So that's positive that we're having that thing change. Do you see anything else production-wise happening? Because I do see several private sector companies stepping up saying, we're going to make ventilators, we're going to make face masks, we're going to make air purification systems. Do you see a lot of that happening now with local small businesses getting into making made in USA stamps on their products now?
Yeah, we do. In fact, one idea we've tossed around internally is does the state issue some sort of logo that signifies you as, having, done all the precautions to stay safe and, you're certified safe or something like that. I know we have a Serve Safe program right now for our restaurants. Maybe we do something like that from a COVID standpoint. I know, there's a big push right now to, hey, let's buy American, let's buy Georgian, let's buy shop small. I think you're going to see a big push from a state level, from a marketing standpoint of, hey, let's support those small business owners that have been hit hard from this. So I would think you'll see something from us pretty soon on that front.
Okay, perfect. And I'm just going to check in with the audience real quick. Jeffrey Hill, he's a small business owner out here. I asked, how do you guys feel about the reopen? He said no bueno, so he's not in favor of the reopen. Stacy DeMarco, she said, I'm ready to start opening. So we got 50-50 right there, one no bueno, one ready to open. And is there any implication if a business falls in that category of, let's say it's a gym, are they mandated to reopen or they can still take their time if they want to?
That's a great question. So, and that's the beauty of this, right? Is that we've given the freedom to you to make that decision. If you and your customers feel comfortable with reopening, by all means, go for it. But we are absolutely not forcing any business to open. Any business who wants to remain closed can stay closed. If you don't want to go out and shop, don't go out and shop. You can stay home. I know my wife, she is keeping us at home. I am the only one that's allowed to go out, and I go to the grocery store and I come right back. And so we're playing it safe on our end, but that's just out of abundance of caution. Again, the order allows folks to reopen under certain conditions. Folks, by all means, can stay closed. And it's certainly drawn thoughts and ideas and feedback from both sides, and we appreciate that. And we've listened to folks and what they've told us. But we just hear story after story of folks who have worked their entire lives to build a business just to see it lost in a few weeks, and it's really heartbreaking. And so we're hoping to get back to a more normal environment pretty soon. But one of the things we're really focused on is let's continue to look at the health data and make sure trends are moving in the right way. So there's that. There's contact tracing that we're getting a lot better on, and then surge capacity, right? So really working on making sure that if there is some sort of surge, that we've got the number of beds and hospital capacity if something should come up. But all that data and numbers so far look very good on that front.
Interesting question, because some people were concerned about that. Like, what if a second wave comes and it's worse than the first wave? So is that something you guys are kind of talking about? Like, we're going to ramp up, extra beds just in case, or is that kind of just we're not thinking that's going to happen at this point?
Oh no, we want to make sure, kind of measure twice, cut once. We want to make sure there are plenty capacity out there way beyond all this. And so, like I said, we continue to monitor the numbers on a really literally minute by minute basis. And if there are any changes or any things that look like they're going in the wrong direction, I know we're going to hop all over it. So, right now, I think the big push is let's get more testing out there.
Yeah,
I think we've got a good number of beds out there and that availability. But you can never be too cautious, and you want to be prepared for absolutely everything.
Mm-hmm. And then, so you mentioned something earlier about a lot of small businesses are losing their entire life in a moment's notice with this. So why do you think small business is having that happen? Because large corporations obviously they're spread out pretty well. They might have funding from different places. So why do you think so many small businesses are probably not going to make it? Quite frankly, I mean, we're probably going to lose a lot of businesses as a result of this. So why do you think most, or not most, but a lot of small businesses are having a tough time with the situation?
I think it's the nature of small business, right? So if you're a small business owner, you're someone who has taken on that risk for the hope of the return at the end of the day. And it is a big risk to start a small business. Let's be honest about it. I mean, a lot of times you're putting your own money on the line to follow an idea and a dream. And, small business owners just don't have that luxury of having, a month or 2 months worth of cash flow in the bank. They're living and grinding it out every single day. And so I think larger companies and corporations can be more immune to this. They're more diversified and where the revenue comes from. Obviously, they're feeling it and they're getting hit too. And a lot of folks have been laid off because of it. But small business owners, like I said, they just don't have as much cushion. And that's one of the things we're trying to solve for is when the governor tasked us, Scott, make Georgia #1 for small business. We did great across a lot of different categories. But where we fell down was on business survivability. A lot of companies here in Georgia don't make it past that 2-3 year mark. And so we're trying to figure out internally, what can the state do to make sure small businesses have that cushion to get beyond? Is it financial education? Is it access to capital? What is it about the state and what maybe we could do or tweak that would allow small businesses to survive past that cliff there?
Because I wonder if it seems like, small businesses, I think of this book called The E-Myth, the entrepreneur myth, and it breaks down, there's the entrepreneur, the technician, and the manager. And the entrepreneur is always the idea, just like got the energy to make something. Technician is the one doing it, but the manager is the business person that looks at the numbers and all that. So would you say that like part of the Georgians First Commission is some of that going to be more education for the small business as far as symposiums, seminars, things like that to teach them so they can better prepare for things like this?
Yeah, so that's the big thing. One of the big, more interesting feedbacks we've gotten is we talked to a lot of business owners who say, Scott, they're looking hindsight 2020 and saying, I didn't know what I didn't know. And Scott, I wish I had known this and that, and I had these resources. And so that's what happens. I mean, you hit the nail on the head. As an entrepreneur gets a great idea for a great business, they get started. They're excited about it. And then they're like, wait, how do I do this or that? Or how do I balance a balance sheet? And what does an income statement look like? And so what I've been amazed by is we have so many online courses available through our technical college system that I would love to see us kind of push those out and make those more readily available. So if you're an entrepreneur and you're grinding it out 24/7, you could log on real quick and say, you know what, I need to learn about, how do I get funding for my business, or, teach me about cash flow and things like that. And you could take an online course through the state of Georgia in an hour or two and pick up that information. So those are some of the ideas we're thinking about, so that when you're the entrepreneur and you start that business, that you've got every tool and resource at your tool belt there to be successful, because that's what we want at the end of the day.
Okay, that makes sense. And there's been a misconception, or maybe not misconception, but that rural America was kind of immune to this. So we saw the images of downtown Atlanta with nobody driving around, looking at the stadium, the streets empty. Which you taking care of all of Georgia. How has this kind of panned out in the rural parts of the state? Because I feel like that's not talked about a whole lot. But how has it panned out in the rural areas?
Yeah, so a couple big things there, right? So we're still fighting with like rural. It's amazing in 2020, like rural internet connectivity. So when you say, okay, send all your kids home and they've got to learn online, well, that sounds all great in Metro Atlanta. But if you're somewhere in the middle of the state and don't have an internet connection to your house or to your business, that's a challenge. And talking from a business perspective, you've got to have internet these days to be online and be operating your business. And so that's been a big challenge to business development in some of our rural areas. That as long as access to healthcare as well. We're blessed here in the Metro Atlanta community with great hospital systems, but as you move outside of 285, that's a challenge. And so it's a challenge during a pandemic, but it's a challenge during normal times when you're trying to recruit a company to an area that has maybe struggling schools, a struggling hospital, and lack of internet connectivity. That's not an easy sell to come sell a startup or entrepreneur to start their business in that area.
So are you seeing more entrepreneurship starting then in the city because of that reason? Because I'd almost imagine that there's more people, you probably see it more, but are any stats about that? Like we're seeing more businesses open in the metro or more successful businesses in the metro because of those things?
It's a great question. I feel like I have seen that stat somewhere. I'll just anecdotally, we hear it all the time. Just the urbanization of America. A lot of today's kids graduate school, and you used to go home and work your parents' business or whatnot. A lot of them are staying in the large metro areas, and they want jobs where they can walk to work, walk to a park, kind of live, work, play, that whole thing. So, we're definitely seeing the new talent and entrepreneurs being sucked up into the urban areas. And it's fascinating. We have the census going on right now. If you haven't the census, make sure to do it. And it'll be fascinating to see the numbers and the trends toward urbanization, like we've talked about.
Okay, perfect. So one thing to kind of think about with this, soft reopen, which we wasn't really fully closed, but we had soft reopen. Let's fast forward from now. Now we don't know, but let's say a second wave happens. Does the lockdown become tighter at that point if we have a second wave, or does it kind of go back to the way it was before?
That's a good question. It's hard to kind of look into the crystal ball and know what's going to come. I'll tell you, even as we do reopen up, there's going to be certain populations that we're going to want to remain closed, right? So for those that are up and above 60, 65, those that are at risk, I think the state will continue to recommend that they shelter in place because those are certainly at the highest risk populations. Again, hard to tell what a lockdown in the future would look like. I think we did a pretty good job of locking down this go round, and it's reflected in the numbers. You can see where we plateaued and now it's starting to go downwards. So this lockdown seemed to have worked pretty well this time, and hopefully this is now and getting further behind us.
Perfect. Okay. And I don't want to dwell on that so much, because obviously it's a timely topic because it just happened. But want to circle back one more time on Georgia First. So people are starting small businesses. They want to get into entrepreneurship. What are some new resources that Georgia First can provide them to help them to thrive or at least get started in this new environment?
Yeah. So one of the things we're working on is, I mentioned a little bit, kind of this idea of a one-stop shop site. So one of the things we looked at was, if you wanted to start a small business today, what are all the licenses, numbers, things that you would have to get, and they're spread all over government. And so we want to take the process of starting a new business down from weeks to minutes and days and minutes. And so shorten that process, put everything at your fingertips. We also want to make it easier. Like I said, one of the things we can control is where the state spends its money. And so one of the things we've been working on is getting conferences out there where we sit right alongside you and show you, how do I get logged in? How do I, figure out how to bid on business? We had a great story across the state where we recently awarded one of our paper contracts to a consortium of small businesses. A great example of kind of the real world effort of what we're doing here.
Mm-hmm.
So you'll see that. You'll see some legislative things come through, and then also some things around access to capital and maybe hiring some folks within the state who are essentially cheerleaders to bring capital from New York, California, and other places here into Georgia.
Awesome. I love that. And that made me just think about something. I saw recently a government contract given to a local cleaning company for helping clean up COVID. So would you say there's a lot of that still out there, that small businesses are missing a lot of government contracts for help with this pandemic?
Yeah, again, I mean, if you're a small business, you're a 1 or 2 person shop, you don't have time to figure out how to navigate all the things. And then we don't make it easy on you either. And then we issue contracts, these big, large contracts that go all over the state, but we figured out a way to maybe regionalize them more to give small business a better opportunity to compete. And we believe from a taxpayer standpoint, the more businesses we have competing for a state dollar, the better service and the lower cost we're going to get. And so, we want to bring in as many small businesses as we can to compete and hopefully win some state business here.
Yeah, because there should be probably a ton out there. I mean, with all the number of places closing down, cleaning companies obviously have to take care of that. And I know it's a certain level of cleaning company, but I just hope that in the middle of this crisis, they can find a way to find revenue they might not have looked for before. Because you hear about government contracts all the time, but when you run a restaurant or something, you might not pay attention to it. But now you might make your business a catering business to government employees or essential workers or something. So with everything going on, obviously your timeline's changed with a lot of stuff you're working on, but give something for the people to look forward to from Georgians First that they can find online, or a new event you're working on or something that would kind of participate. Because I do like the narrative of pushing Georgia business. So let them know what's coming up next for them to pay attention to for you.
Yeah, definitely. So what I would tell you first and foremost, if you haven't done so already, for those listening, please go visit our website, georgiansfirst.georgia.gov. Again, georgiansfirst.georgia.gov. If you Google it, will come up first there. And so we've got a tab on there, tell us your story. We've literally had hundreds of small businesses reach out and tell us either about regulation that's getting in their way or ideas about how we can help them. Please check out the website here. We also are recruiting folks who want to get involved, who say, I've got a great idea. I've got something I want to work on for you. Again, literally hundreds of small businesses across the state have reached out to us, and we've gotten volunteers to work on this project with us. So if you've got a passion about something, you got a passion for small business, I absolutely want to hear from you and work with you. Again, because our best ideas come from small business. You can look out for our final report, which is going to be issued here sometime in June, which will outline our recommendations to the governor, essentially a roadmap as to how do we become the number 1 state for small business. And the work doesn't stop after that report goes out. We need help kind of putting those recommendations into place, and that's where you guys come in as well. Hey, Daryl, I don't know if I can hear you. It sounds like you might be on mute here. Hold on.
There we go. That's my bad. One-man show. So I apologize for the error there on the website. I put GA instead of GIA. So it's
You're all good.
Now, georgiansfirst.georgia.gov. Check it out. And Scott, thank you for doing this. I know it's kind of a crazy time for you. I'm at the same way. I'm the only one leaving the house most of the time too. So I know it's kind of a different time, but I appreciate the work you're doing. And are there any upcoming online events you guys have coming, or teachings that you have coming for people?
That's a great question. I would just encourage folks, if they haven't done so already, what's called SBDC program through UGA. They have a great, so SBD, Small Business Development Centers, they've got folks on the ground who can help small businesses with resources. So, if you don't know who your SBDC rep is, check out UGA, SBDC. They've got some great people who are giving webinars and information on all sorts of programs that are out there. So check them out. It's a free service offered through the state and a fantastic opportunity.
Your tax dollars paid for it, so you might as well take advantage of it. And,
Amen. Amen. Amen.
Right now, in my opinion, if you don't come out of this pandemic with either a new skill set or you've expanded your business in some kind of way, you wasted this time, because obviously we don't have traffic as much now because we're not in the cars as often. So you should learn something, and SBDC is a great place to find those resources. There's one at Kennesaw State by where I live as well, so they're all over the place to learn from them. So Scott, any parting words you can leave with people, how to find you, anywhere to look for you online? Just share your information. This is your time.
Yeah, so I'm on all the social media stuff, so you can find me at Scott Hilton GA. That's at Scott Hilton GA on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, etc. Would love to connect with you. Again, I love hearing directly from small business. I'll put a plug in for the governor. It's not easy right now. I'd ask for your prayers for wisdom and strength. I know he's literally working 24/7, him and his team. Really working through a time where it's not easy making some of these decisions. And so I would ask for that support there. And I know he's working hard to do what's best for not only our business community, but our families to keep everyone safe. And so I know he's working hard for you, and he just loves the feedback that we get along the way. So Daryl, I'm really appreciative of you setting this up.
Yeah, no problem. No matter your political affiliation, leadership, you always want to survive and do a good job. So no matter how you felt about the last election, it's just make sure the job is done right. So I appreciate you being in the middle on that, Scott. I know it's a hard job, especially now. Well, folks, thanks for joining us for Business with Benefits. This will be on replay, and we'll make the podcast of it later. But Scott, I appreciate your time, and everybody be safe out there. Whether you're going to go to the gym, bowling, tattoo, whatever open business, if you go, still be safe. Don't think you throw caution to the wind right now, and still be safe when you're out there. But it's been fun, Scott. We'll let the people get out of here, and we'll catch you next time.